The days were hot and the heat inside of the barracks was unbearable. Colonel Robert Hogan had been successful in many ways with his own wage on war with the Germans. There had been many successful missions, but today he was looking to find something very special. For tomorrow would be the 4th of July, his country's birthday. He walked out of his room and spoke to his men. Newkirk was sitting at the table playing with his deck of cards. He and the other men heard the door of Hogan's room open and looked up. They could see the look on their friend's face and knew that something was up. Every one of them took their seats and eagerly awaited the next mission that they were sure was on the mind of their commander and friend. Hogan liked his group. They were good at their jobs and faithful to the mission. Their mission here at Stalag 13 was to make sure that the Allies beat the Germans and that peace would once be the way of the world. Hogan was an American, but Lebeau and Newkirk were not, so the 4th of July didn't have such a meaning to them as it did to him. However, he knew that no matter what he asked of them, they would do anything he asked. "What's up, Colonel?" Newkirk asked him. Hogan crossed his arms and spoke. "You guys know that the 4th of July is coming up and I want to give the Germans a special surprise. So I have an idea. Carter, how are you at making fireworks?" Carter, who was the man who specialized in weapons, smiled. "This is going to be fun," he thought to himself. However, to the colonel he smiled and said, "What kind would you like? Loud, colorful, the type that lands on the guardhouse?" Colonel Hogan smiled and told him, "Why don't you make it a combination?" With that, Carter began his plans. He would make these special. He knew what the of July was. Now Hogan turned to Newkirk. "We are looking at hitting that pesky train once again. The Germans have almost finished the tracks and new station just down the road are. Sources tell us that the tracks will be ready for use in about 3 days. Now, I don't want to stop their celebration, so we will let them complete their work. It will be then that we will have our own 4th of July celebration, and the Germans will be treated to the display that they will not soon forget." When they got back, they told everyone of what had happened. Each member of the group expressed their concern, but each one knew that this was just part of their life, and as things sometimes went while they were doing their part to win this lousy war. "As for me, I think that I will go visit Klink and find out what and when their celebration will be." With that, Hogan went out of the barracks and the men went to work making the plans for their next mission. Everyone knew their jobs and did not need to be told what to do. As Hogan walked over to the main office, he ran into Sergeant Schultz. Schultz was keeping some information. Hogan could always tell because the man would start bumbling and hinting that he had some information that Hogan would be interested in. Hogan pulled a candy bar out of his pocket and Schultz started to talk. "Klink has some visitors coming, big ones from Berlin, I hear. They have a big celebration planned for the 4th. The new railroad train station and tracks will be officially opened on that day." The news could not have been better for Hogan. He would be able to have a real celebration of 4th of July like no other. Now to talk to Klink and verify everything. He showed no emotion as he acknowledged Schultz and headed to Klink's office. As Hogan entered the building, he went over to Hilda, Klink's secretary. He was in the middle of some shenanigans when Klink heard the noise and interrupted him. Without remorse, Hogan headed into Klink's office. The office was bare but messy as usual, and as Klink started talking, Hogan helped himself to half a dozen cigars in Klink's box. Klink always had a scowl on his face. He knew that he was the man, the part of the superior race. But something about Hogan always made him uncomfortable. "What brings you into my office on this hot day?" He was wiping his brow with a handkerchief, looking very uncomfortable. Hogan smiled and fiddled with another cigar that he had taken from the box. "I hear that there will be a celebration on the 4th. But, as you know, that is my country's date of birth, and we would like to have a little celebration here ourselves." "A celebration at a prisoner of war camp? What are you planning or hoping for?" Klink asked in a nasty voice. "We would like to be able to have some outside games. Just regular games like filling a CP with a spoon while running, things like that." But then Klink's phone and it was ringing. It was General Burkhalter, and he was coming on the 4th for the opening of the new train station and tracks. Just what Klink needed, and with a flip of his hand Hogan had been removed from his office. This pleased Hogan as it gave him more time with Hilda. The plans were already being made as the colonel entered his barracks once again. But Hogan was in charge and he would have the final say. Of course, they were a working crew in a horrific condition and danger was everywhere. It was decided that LeBeau and Carter would go out through the woods and make their way through the tunnel and carefully photograph the tracks and news station. The woods would be full of German soldiers and the job would be extremely dangerous. The men showed no fear as they dressed and put on black face makeup in attempt to hide themselves. As they went out of the stump that concealed the tunnel, they nearly missed the spotlight that was rotating the light across the land every few seconds. But they were out. Just as expected, the woods were crawling with soldiers heavily armed. But through their wit and luck they reached the railroad station approximately 3 miles from Theerstalig. Carefully, they took the pictures and left. As they were leaving they heard shouts and had to run and hide in a cave that they had found months ago. Only after several fearful minutes did they dare head back into the woods and make their way back to Stalag 13. The next days were very busy for the group. After all, they still had to play the part of a Erkhauer time prisoner, all the time being some of the top spies working in Germany at the time. Schultz had come in as usual and had been paid off by LeBeau and his famous cooking. He just got paid off with food. But there would be no communications, for the communication locator had been brought into camp. The Germans were doing everything they could to protect the news station and tracks, and Burkhaller was on his way. But the 4th came and the other men who were prisoners in the camp were getting ready for the special games. Although they were not privy to all that went on, they were aware of the many tunnels under some of the other barrack and heard the dogs and watched LeBeau play with them. The night before, on the 3rd, the team of LeBeau, Hogan, Newkirk and Carter made their way through the woods and to the tracks. There they lay down their bombs and timed them to go off for 6 p.m. The time that the train was scheduled to arrive at the station was 5:30 p.m. This would make sure that the bombs would go off while everything was in full swing. Also, it assured that they could watch the explosions from their Stalag 13 and be safe from being suspected of having anything to do with it. That evening the men played the games and Seal Brad for Ed with the whole camp. They watched as General Burkhaller leave and just nodded. Klink, as usual, had not been invited to the festivities and had retired early. It was at 8 p.m. that Carter took out his fireworks and got ready to set them off. In unison those celebratic fireworks went off with the bombs at the tracks and station. The noise was deafening and Klink came running out of his bed yelling. As usual, the men acted innocent and he just was bumbling back when Burkhaller came into the camp with his hair and everything astray. He looked funny and it was all Hogan and his men could do not to laugh. With that, Sergeant Schultz said he knew nothing and the men started making plans to destroy the next Nazi need.